Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, I had promised last time that I was going to go ahead and find a new book to share here when it comes to the wonderful world of cryptids and monsters. Well, lo and behold, I found one, and it's an oldie too. In fact, you're looking at the front cover associated with it now. It's there once again from the archive.org website. It's one that was actually written back in 1973. So can you believe that? It's 50 years old when it comes to this book. But it's called Strange Monsters and Great Searches by George Laycock. When I was looking at the information on it, it seems to cover a huge variety of different cryptids and different monsters that are out there. Some of them are out there in the sea, others are out there on land, some of them are on let's say up in the air too. Some of them are real, some of them are prehistoric. It's just a full gamut of things to showcase here. So yeah, I definitely wanted to go ahead and pick this one here. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start chapter 1 when it comes to this. And right off the bat, you'll see why I picked it all together. The first chapter is called The Mystery of Loch Ness. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start this new book, chapter 1, part 1. The Mystery of Loch Ness, and then I'll be able to give my thoughts and opinions on it afterward. So here's what it says. There lies, some say, a gigantic monster in a beautiful lake in the Highlands of Scotland. It has come to the surface just often enough to puzzle and frighten people of the region and keep them speculating about the identity of their monster. By now, more than 1,000 people claim to have seen the mysterious serpent believed to dwell in the depths of Loch Ness. Loch Ness is a beautiful place for a monster to live. The lake, long, narrow, and deep, is flanked by high green hills where dew and fog and frequent rains keep the blankets of lush vegetation dripping with moisture. Clouds pile up in the valleys, and from the high vantage points, travelers sometimes look down, not only on the loch, but on the clouds as well. The centuries have not robbed this magic scene of its sense of loneliness and quiet. Beside the lake stand ancient abandoned castles. Nearby is an age-old monastery, and people living around the lake occupy the land that their ancestors held. For 23 miles, Loch Ness stretches along its valley. It connects with the sea through the River Ness. Within the river is a system of navigation locks which permits passages of boats from saltwater into fresh, and some say provides opportunity as well for a traveling sea serpent to slip in and out as the mood strikes. It would, of course, not be the only creature to live part of its life in salt water and the rest in fresh. Fish known to move from saltwater into freshwater streams for spawning are classified as anadromous. The lake is scarcely more than a mile wide through most of its length, but it goes down to a depth of 754 feet. These waters are stained dark brown from draining through beds of peat en route over to the lake. One cannot peer more than a few feet into the dim hidden world beneath the surface. Therefore, observers must depend on this serpent to come to the surface or out on land if they are ever to see it. Many do not believe. The Loch Ness monster, they sometimes hint, is not in there at all. This, in fact, is what William Brodie, captain of the steam tug operating on the lake, used to think. Humbug, he said. Loch Ness monster indeed. Then, one summer afternoon in 1938, when his tug was pushing along steadily across the fog-shrouded lake, there appeared out of the depths a creature unknown to all on board. For a short distance it swam along beside the tugboat. It was long and slender, and humps on its back stuck out of the water as the humps of a sea serpent are supposed to do. Next, the creature turned on the power, spurted ahead of the boat, and then finally dived. A short time later, it appeared again far out in the front, still increasing its lead on the sluggish boat, where Captain Brodie stood wide-eyed on the bridge. The captain had joined the believers. There can, he is quoted as saying, be no doubt of the monster's existence. Others who have been startled by the sight of the creature hasten to agree. For example, there was a motorcyclist named Grant who some years ago was speeding along the North Shore Road beside Loch Ness in the darkness of the night. Suddenly, in the beam of his headlight, there emerged from the woods a creature such as he had never before witnessed. Nobody wants to go crashing willy-nilly into a monster, and Mr. Grant maneuvered skillfully to avoid the collision. Just why a sea serpent should cross the road is one of the big mysteries. To explain it away simply by saying that it wants to get on the other side seems hardly adequate. But the Loch Ness Monster has been reported on other occasions too, as coming out of the water to make its way over land for short distances. Mr. Grant reported that as he caught the form of the creature in the light of its cycle, it made two bounds and then cleared the road, then quickly sloshed back into Loch Ness, there to vanish beneath the foaming surface. It was, he estimated, between 15 and 20 feet long, had a small head, beady eyes, long slender neck, and appeared to be dark and slimy. Another report of the Loch Ness Monster being out of its water came from John McKay. Mr. McKay operated a hotel nearby, and one spring evening in 1933 was out driving with his wife over to the newly completed road along the north shore of the lake. There, in plain sight, was Nessie, as folks around Loch Ness had come to know their sea serpent. The creature at once dived into the lake. Later, Mr. McKay reported to a local newspaper what he and his wife had seen, and the story spread rapidly. The Loch Ness Monster became world famous in the years that followed. Books have since been written about it. Countless newspaper accounts have told of its appearances. Expeditions have been mounted to unravel the mystery. Meanwhile, around Loch Ness and throughout Scotland, people have divided into three camps. There are those who believe, those who doubt, and those who keep an open mind. Nessie has been around a long time. For hundreds of years, there have been stories around Loch Ness of the monster that roams the depths of the lake. It was written centuries ago that a certain water monster was driven away by prayer, but the effects of the prayer were apparently temporary. Over the years, legends about the sea serpent were passed down from generation to generation. It is said in one such legend to have killed a man. Folks around the loch have long felt that the creature might reappear at any moment. But not until reported again by Mr. McKay in 1933 did Nessie rise to true prominence. As the story spread, more people began watching for the monster. People who want to see a monster stand a far better chance than those who do not care one way or the other. This is more in the nature of people than monsters. Perhaps no monster has ever done more for people anywhere than has the Loch Ness Monster. Living or dead, real or not, it has to be the most valuable creature to ever be possessed by the Scottish people. Those who have come seeking it have brought a new source of wealth to the country. As the stories of Nessie spread around the world, the people of Scotland began to notice a strange and wonderful result. Curious tourists now plan their travels to include the Highlands of Scotland and Loch Ness, home of the world's best-known sea serpent. From all parts of the world, they can now come to the town of Inverness. Many of them board the Scot II and then travel out onto the lake, sharing for a few hours the mystery-shrouded environment of the serpent's ancient home. The Scout II makes 3 trips daily. From Inverness, it goes to about the middle of the lake, turns, and then comes back to its dock. Lining its rails are the curious ones. Many insist they do not believe the tales of the sea serpent, that they come only because they have for so long wanted to see the highlands and then hear the strains of the bagpipes moaning with the winds. But instead of looking up on the hills, their eyes more often are turned down upon the dark waters of Loch Ness. Cameras hang from their necks, binoculars are ready in their hands. These are the ones who do not know quite what to believe. What did John McKay really see? What was this strange unnatural creature sighted by Captain Brodie and so many others? How could it have been seen so many times and yet not be there? Surely there is a possibility that all the people living around the lake, the ones who insist that there has to be something out there, may be right, and so the visitors hopefully study the rippling waters of Loch Ness. Some outsiders have devised elaborate plans for capturing or killing the beast and then transporting it to a museum, zoo, or circus. A giant electronic net has been suggested, and so has the possibility of shooting it from a submarine. In efforts to prevent monster poaching, officials have passed regulations, perhaps the only rules in the world, against the harming of a sea serpent. Most who come to study the mystery of Scotland's sea serpent, however, have no plans to harm it. They seek only the truth, the opportunity to solve for good this centuries-old mystery. Some come in groups with camping equipment. Above the loch, they set up their tents and they post serpent watchers. Some have made pictures of strange forms appearing on the lake. One of the most famous pictures shows a long, slender neck, small head, part of the tail, all attached to a large balloon-like body. Perhaps no one has studied the Loch Ness monster more than Tim Dinsdale has. For long days and weeks, he wandered the shores of the Loch Ness. He carried cameras and binoculars and possessed a grim determination to prove that the monster does exist. His hunt for the creature is outlined in his two books on the subject. He has very little patience with the non-believers, especially the men of science who steadfastly refuse to join the search for the serpent of Loch Ness. Dinsdale says they simply ignore the facts. The case for a sea serpent in Loch Ness is strengthened, according to fans of Nessie, by the appearance of similar creatures in other parts of the world. For example, there is the monster of Lake Okanagan, British Columbia, there in Western Canada. This lake in some ways resembles Loch Ness, long, narrow, and almost as deep, with cold water and a good population of fish. There have also been frequent reports of a monstrous serpent living in a lake in Manitoba in central Canada. Perhaps if science would apply its efforts to the search for the Loch Ness monster, the mystery might be solved. So far, most of the work has been done, not by scientists, but by amateur monster hunters. Most of the serious work has been coordinated by the Loch Ness Phenomenon Investigation Bureau, LTD. More than once, there has been the suggestion that sonar is a tool for finding Nessie. Sonar is a method of using electronics to study what lies beneath the surface of water. It was developed during World War II for tracking submarines. Electric impulses are sent into the water. They're converted into sound waves and they travel through the water, spreading out into a broad cone as they leave the source. When one of these waves strikes any obstacle underwater, the impulse bounces back like an echo to be measured by the instrument that sent it. The length of time taken for it to return tells the depth of the object. The bottom of the lake will reflect the sound, but so will obstacles appearing between the surface and the lake bottom. In addition, the sonar reveals the depth, size, and movement of whatever is down there. In 1968, a scientific party moved in on Nessie with electronic locators. In due time, the results were published in the New Scientist, a respected British scientific journal. Engineers and a research team from the University of Birmingham set up the equipment on the shore of Loch Ness. And then, as the impulses traveled through the cold depths of Loch Ness, engineer D. Gordon Tucker carefully studied the screen of the sonar outfit. Flickering signals began to echo to the machine. Together, they told Tucker a fascinating story and opened up a new possibility. There was, as the folks around Loch Ness have long insisted, something down there, and plainly it was not a small monster. For 13 minutes, two large objects had their images reflected as the signals were photographed on movie film. One was about 164 feet long, the other somewhat smaller. Did the images of these monsters move on the screen? Definitely. Their speed was about 17 miles an hour, and they dived at a rate of 450 feet per minute. After these observations, the research team quickly consulted with biologists who know the common fish of Loch Ness. Could a school of fish actually have caused this kind of signal? The answer was not likely, and this, to many observers, was new evidence that Nessie might after all be real. But if the Loch Ness monster does live, what in the world could it be? Investigators over the years have advanced two favorite explanations. Some say it is the larvae of a giant eel. Others insist that Nessie must be one of the ancient group of reptiles known as plesiosaurs. One thing wrong with this theory is the plesiosaurs are believed to have come extinct 70 million years ago. Perhaps it is just as well that we don't know yet for certain whether or not Loch Ness has a real monster. Those who claim Nessie belongs to the plesiosaurs might point out that scientists have been surprised before when they found extinct creatures still surviving. The best known example is the coelacanth. Then that's it. That's everything associated with Chapter 1 of this new book, Strange Monsters and Great Searches, The Mystery of Loch Ness. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. I thought it was going to be part 1, but no, actually it was the whole chapter. Thought to myself, let me just cover it all since it's just a few pages on here. But as you can see, you get an idea of what the book is. It's just like all the other wonderful books that I've covered in my channel here, where it showcases several examples on the subject. and then it showcases good details with them and also in analysis. So here we have a situation involving the Loch Ness monster. Apparently its history, it's been there for quite some time, but it was actually in the 1930s that it was first really reported. Whether or not it was actually earlier from there, we'll see. But otherwise, I'm sure there was, but otherwise, the first actual true reported sightings started to happen around there. And it states that Loch Ness area, the lake, is just perfect for it. Here you have something that is almost a wild mide, about 800 feet deep, and it connects to from a freshwater to a saltwater area and back and forth. So the same area that the boats are using to travel in and out of that location is the same thing that this infamous cryptid, the Loch Ness monster, could easily do as well. And then obviously you have examples that were listed of people who were skeptics at first. There was a guy named Captain Brody who in turn had one of the earliest encounters, one of the first reported ones. He said that he was operating his tugboat, and then all of a sudden, there it was. This creature was right there, right next to them, and there it was looking back at them. Apparently, there was him, and there were some other people within the boat itself, and there was a big fog around that lake, but still, they were able to see it in all of its glory, and then it instantly just pushed forward. It decided to just move away very quickly, and then it was gone. I remember covering the other encounter about that motorcyclist, the guy by the name of Grant, who came across the Loch Ness in the middle of the night. Can you imagine that? There you are, basically going down the highway by yourself, or that street, whatever it was, in the middle of the night, and all that darkness, just the light from the motorcycle, from the front headlight providing source. And then there it is. There's the Loch Ness monster shuffling about from one point of the road to the other. It perfectly created a visual, the way this guy was writing his information, this George Laycock. So it made it seem like it was just like a movie. Here you had a creature that was about 20 feet long, long slender neck, beady eyes, dark and slimy, and yet it was right there in front of the motorcycle. It was almost as if it was surprised by this person as the person was surprised by it. And then there was some other encounters that were there too. The most interesting thing though was the equipment, that sonar test that was used, and the chapter highlighted how it captured something. Two things actually. Apparently for about 13 minutes, two large objects were reflected on that sonar radar, and one of them was 164 feet long. How crazy is that? Could the Loch Ness monster really be that large? Either way, though, it was moving very fast too, 17 miles an hour, diving to about 500 feet per minute. So it's something that's very fast and powerful too. So that seems to add more notion that the Loch Ness monster is real. But let me know what you guys and gals think with regards to it, and the book too. Brand new book. It's about 200 pages, so it's going to be lots of great stuff to cover going forward. Again, there's going to be more monsters, sea monsters, land. There's going to be cryptids in the air as well. Real cryptids too. Stuff that's been discovered from back then to now be here now, and others. You'll see all of that soon. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.